Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, песня 7, глава 14, текст. 14, да, Маканчур, ты выбрал? 14.
So, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, Text 14. Let's read Sanskrit first.
Kalpayet vritim atmana sheshesvatvam tyajan pragya padavim mahātmā iyat. Прочитаю перевод.
So now let's read the translation. An intelligent person should be satisfied with eating prasāda, food offered to the Lord, or with performing the 5 different kinds of yajña, pañca-sūnā. By such activities, one can give up attachment for the body and so-called proprietorship with reference to the body. When one is able to do this, he is firmly fixed in the position of a mahātmā. Very simple practices described here, how to become a mahātmā. Just eat prasāda and that's it. That's all you need.
Well,
of course, this is a whole process. It's not such a simple process. Formally, it appears to be a simple thing, but to eat prasāda means eating prasāda. So you have to be in Kṛṣṇa's consciousness. You have to cook for God. Just like Prabhupada used to say, sannyasis are forbidden to cook for themselves. It is forbidden by the rules. But for Kṛṣṇa, he can cook. So externally, well, yes, he does cook, but the question is the way he is cooking. So he cooks for the Lord, and then when he eats prasāda, it's also a different thing. So we have simple standards here. So we also have to be transformed, ideally, because we serve to Kṛṣṇa. But in other regions, in India, Jagannath Puri, so they have very complicated procedures when cooking prasāda and offering prasāda and eating it. Very many subtle things, subtle details. When we follow these rules, we understand that prasāda is a very powerful spiritual weapon. So Prabhupada has given this presentation, this image of a prasāda to the Western people. He had shown them how to cook it, how to offer it, how to eat it. So the food was the first and primary element. The Western people, they couldn't understand the philosophy, but prasāda, it was refreshing them all, giving them some spiritual strength. So in East, during the Woodstock, there are usually about 800,000 people there, living in tents, all different kinds of people. They just come there to have their celebration, to have fun. But at the same time, there's like 1 hectare of a land allocated for them. They also have their own stage, places where these people are offered to get some tattoos, to have some other activities. There's also Kirtan from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m., maybe even till 10 p.m. Kirtan goes on, and the kitchen never stop cooking. So there are not many lectures because it's quite noisy over there. So usually it's about Kirtan and prasāda continuously. So people come there from all those rock vibrations, intoxications, Of course, they take them, so they break all the principles. The youngsters usually. So they come to listen to Kirtan totally resourceless, deprived of any kind of energy, looking like dead people. Sometimes they just lie on the land, listening to Kirtan and eating some prasāda. So it takes them about half a day to get back to the initial form. They kind of refreshing themselves, then they go back to where they had come from. And it says here that so you have to enjoy prasāda. There are also 5 kinds of yajña, some other sacrifices. Sankirtana yajña replaces all of them. It says that it's enough this age to become mahātmā. Of course, if you do not forget about the spiritual nature of all this phenomena. So now the purport of Srila Prabhupada, nature already has an arrangement to feed us. By the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is an arrangement for eatables for every living entity within the 8,400,000 forms of life. Every living entity has to eat something. And in fact, the necessities for his life have already been provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord has provided food for both the elephant and the ant. All living beings are living at the cost of the Supreme Lord, and therefore, one who is intelligent should not work very hard for material comforts. Rather, one should save his energy for advancing in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. All created things in the sky, in the air, on land, and in the sea belong to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and every living being is provided with food. Therefore, one should not be very much anxious about economic development and unnecessarily waste time and energy with the risk of falling down in the cycle of birth and death. So concerning food, then identifying with food is very strong. So this identification that a person has is really strong. So this connection is very strong between ahankara and food. Any kind of food, the food that we eat, or jnana or intellectual food, a person takes it and it becomes his essence, his firm essence. So everything we were taught at school or universities, so we identify ourselves with all this knowledge. So this is food as well. So that's why, because of the force of this identification, the potency of this identification, so if we see this food is suitable, we eat it. But here, prasāda. So it stops this process automatically. Just the eating food through stomach, through tongue, stomach and genitals. So this process is stopped with help of prasāda. Realization that food is the mercy of God. So that's why we offer it to God again. Anyways, it belongs to God. But the process of cooking this food, it motivates eating this food. So it means that God can eat this food himself as well. So we offer this food. And also prasāda is called the food that has been eaten, karma that's been eaten, so it doesn't exist anymore. So this purification, it takes place immediately. So right after having eaten prasāda, a person feels differently. So this is Kṛṣṇa's consciousness. And then greed for food goes away as well. You start controlling the tongue. The other detail is how the prasāda itself works. You want to spread this food. Almost all devotees, they start spreading this food. They start with that. And after that they think that, oh, we can sell this food as well, we can spread prasāda. The main thing is not to sell, but to spread prasāda. So this is our truthful aspiration. So that's a true position of a spiritual person that lives for spreading this spiritual knowledge. So this is a sacred food. So the whole chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita is devoted to glorifying prasāda. It emphasizes how much prasāda is important, how much it is essential. So you don't have to be very much intellectual to understand what it says there. Food becomes our body automatically. It's interesting that it is hard to grasp some knowledge sometimes, but it's not hard to eat prasāda. And it's also a very potent weapon as well. So here very simple things are described, but if you do these things according to very high standards, then undoubtedly it transforms everything. So now we are reading the next text without the purport. Every day one should worship the Supreme Being who is situated in everyone's heart, and on this basis one should separately worship the demigods, the saintly persons, ordinary human beings, and living entities, one's forefathers and one's self. In this way, one is able to worship the Supreme Being in the core of everyone's heart. So you see, this happens. So it's our own soul. So devotees start out with being proud of being a soul, of understanding that they are a soul, not a physical body. So this understanding, this realization, it comes eventually. This understanding of the fact that I'm not this body, I'm a soul. So we start differentiate these things. We realize this spiritual hierarchy, and we start worshipping prasāda as well on a spiritual level. So if a person is a family man, if he does not understand all these things, he will be prone to violence. He will commit some violence naturally, because this is self-identification with home, wife and food. He will not be able to overcome these things. He will inevitably start committing violence. So here it says that all these things are prescribed for family people. Of course, we have to have deities and altar at home. And also the Supreme Being is situated in everyone's heart. That's what it says here. So you have to worship deities for a long time, until a person can see this deity in the heart of the others, starting from devotees and so on. So this Kṛṣṇa's consciousness will be spreading. So for sannyasis it's not described to worship deities, for his spreading knowledge is prescribed, although it's not forbidden. It's not prescribed, but he can worship deities.
все падает. Кроме того, памятуя о его присутствии, также поклоняться полубогам,
so you have to also worship demigods, remembering about the Supreme Being, also to the saintly persons, ordinary human beings, and other living entities, also the forefathers. So here it says about the mental level. For example, deity can be seen in the form of an archivigraha.
Людей, да, в сердце каждого, да, где-то находится вот божество. А вот что касается полубогов, мы не видим их.
You can see some deities in human beings. But about the saintly people, you don't see them so much, right? So often.
Это тоже умозрительно будет. Предки, умозрительно.
So ordinary people, just on a mental level, forefathers, also on a mental level. We don't see Kṛṣṇa in them so much. This is on a mental level.
Главное, собственно говоря, это ментальное служение.
So the main thing is the mental service. All the understanding, realization goes through the mind and intelligence, and even deeper. So if mentally, if we don't engage our mind mentally, nothing will help us. So mantras, reading the scripts and meditate with the help of the mind that the God does exist. Demigods means the elements of nature. So we understand that God is everywhere. He exists everywhere through the demigods. Through the natural elements. So we have to understand this difference. That the Lord, He is present everywhere, but differently. Just like Paramatma is everywhere, but differently, in a different way. So in demigods we see some things, and in people we see other things. Even if they do not follow Shastras, or they do not follow some prescriptions, anyway you see that their super soul is there as well. So a person already has this Krishna's consciousness if he sees these things. And we also have to understand that we are soul, mahātmā, great soul, great position. Great position is given to serve, not for just the identification. A soul does not identify itself with anything else. So it's not for the identification, but for the surface. So spirit identifies itself with service. If you ask a devotee, an advanced devotee, who he is, he would say, I'm just a servant. He wouldn't point in his social position or his form or something. He would say he's servant. So the Sacharyas and the queens of Dwaraka, Lord Nityananda, they all say, I'm a servant. Radharani says, I'm just a maid servant. Identification means my propriety. But the body of a devotee, it's a spiritual essence. So we have to think ourselves as of servants. So let's read more. When one is enriched with wealth and knowledge, which are under his full control and by means of which he can perform yajña or please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one must perform sacrifices, offering oblations to the fire, according to the directions of the Shastras. In this way, one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these elements that we depend on, we use fire, of course, we can't live without it, or the electricity. The whole civilization is based on fire. So oil, atomic energy, so fossil fuels, right? So we cannot do anything these days without all these elements, so these technologies and metals.
И тоже важно, как и пища, это другой элемент, да, на котором все это вот производится на огне.
So in food, of course, it's also cooked on fire.
Нужно понять, что это энергия Бога.
You have to understand that this is the energy of God as well. Because, again, if there's some self-identification, when the person is alive, he lives in a house, all the communications are connected to this house, electricity, tap water, ventilation, of course, some drainage facilities, sewage system, so the fire in order to heat or cook. So you see, someone lives in this house. So it gives us all these communications. They allow us to live in this house. So we just have to regulate them. If they're not regulated, it's too hot or too cold, we do something. We create this home atmosphere where you can freely exist. When we go past the cemetery, it also has some homes in there, but no communications in there, no electricity, nothing. We feel it instantly. So no communications are needed there. You see the difference? A soul does not need all these things. It's just the identification. Subtle body also does not need all these things. So for the gross body, people do it. That's how they get attached to home, because they have home and water and conditioning system. If you connect all these elements to God, we get liberation. This is Bhakti Yoga. If it's Ashtanga Yoga, you just leave your home, no communications, no facilities, nothing. That's another approach, a very complicated approach, unbearable one. So if a grihastha or householder is sufficiently educated in Vedic knowledge and has become sufficiently rich to offer worship to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he must perform yagas as directed by the authorized scriptures. In Bhagavad Gita 3.9 clearly says, everyone may be engaged in his occupational duties, but the result of these duties should be offered for sacrifice to satisfy the Supreme Lord. So Kṛṣṇa is the one that enjoys. If one is fortunate enough to possess transcendental knowledge, as well as the money with which to perform sacrifices, one must do it according to the directions given in the Shastras. So success means what? Money and knowledge. This is all called artha. Money is also called artha, economical, prosper. Artha also means some beneficial qualities. So if a person has artha, so he must perform sacrifices. So who can enjoy his wife or his home, his children? Just a little bit. It's a mental thing, not just a mental platform. You get used to that, you get bored, it can happen in any house, big or small, cold or warm. Until you install deities, you start chanting holy names, just a cemetery. Same thing as a cemetery, but with just communications, with all the facilities. Boredom, worries, fights, some scars, because of which a person goes old very often. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.3.52, Dvapare paricharya yam kalautat hari kirtanat. The entire Vedic civilization aims at satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This was possible in Satya Yuga by meditation upon the Supreme Lord within the core of one's heart, and in Treta Yuga by the performance of costly yajñas. The same goal could be achieved in Dvapara Yuga by worship of the Lord in a temple. And in this age of Kali, one can achieve the same goal by performing Sankirtana Yajña. So you see, this equality is set before Ashtangana Yoga sacrifices, expensive temples. So all these things are equal to Sankirtana Yajña. From the spiritual point of view, there is no difference. But it's used according to the place, time, and circumstances. We should do all we can, and that's enough. No more is needed. Therefore, one who has education and wealth must use them to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by helping the Sankirtana movement that has already begun, the Hare Krishna movement, or Krishna consciousness movement. All educated and wealthy persons must join this movement, since money and education are meant for service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If money and education are not engaged in the service of the Lord, these valuable assets must be engaged in the service of Maya. The education of so-called scientists, philosophers, and poets is now engaged in the service of Maya, and the wealth of the rich is also engaged in Maya's service. The surface of Maya, however, creates a chaotic condition in the world. Therefore, the wealthy man and the educated man should sacrifice their knowledge and opulence by dedicating them for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord movement. So the most intelligent people will do that. The knowledge in Maya means just your personal point of view. So Maya steals the knowledge by this way. All the knowledge that a person gets, he uses all this knowledge just for himself, for his personal gain. And his opinion depends on his past actions, his karma. That's why everybody acts differently, and it's becoming more and more difficult these days, this age. Things that people hadn't done before, now they do. Things that were forbidden in the past now are allowed to be done. So it's a complicated thing. Now we have professions that didn't even exist in the past. But in essence, this is all Maya, illusion. And people get confused. All these opinions, they confuse people. Opinions are not just the knowledge that they get. They get knowledge with the help of mind and intelligence. And intelligence chooses according to the karma. Sometimes we understand one thing, but we don't the other. A person does what he was doing in his previous life. If we were engaged in devotional service in our previous life, then in this life we'll be doing the same. So no matter what we did in our previous lives, we will remember them in this life. Nothing else can be located in your mind. And it's all, it all overlaps. There's some overlapping. One association or impression, or some memory, so they kind of collide with some other episodes in our lives. Now it's amazing that the sphere of culture already has a special term, sexuality, in the sphere of culture. So that's an example of how karma functions. So it's also part of culture, because we develop culture in this way. In the West, it's so developed that they have these marriages of the same genders. So science is actually supposed to free you from the sufferings. And the reason for that is in the Grihastha ashram. So now you see there's no brahmacharis or sannyasas, only the family life. So that's why there's a whole chapter for the householders here, because it supports all the other ashrams. So you go to family life through brahmacharya ashram and then you leave it to become a sannyasi. So there are only opinions of the philosophers and scientists and poets. So when a person uses all his opinions to serve Krishna, they can all be used. And that's how the absolute truth is set. Even if you have different opinions, the conclusion is just one. Single, serve to Krishna. Even though my opinion is different, I just have to serve to Krishna. So our mission is to engage as many people into Sankirtana as we can. So let's read a little more. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Kṛṣṇa, is the enjoyer of the sacrificial offerings. You see how Krishna has arranged everything in this world. So he has to have his representative, because materialistic people, they cannot see God. So there have to be some representatives. In Vedic culture, Brahmins that serve to deities. So we don't have these professions in Kazakhstan, America, or Russia. Pujaris, representatives of God, they have this culture in India. Do you know who Pujari is? A very respected person. If this Pujari is in charge of big temples, they're very highly respected in the society, because they are the representatives of God. So Krishna has arranged everything in the way that he says, feed Brahmins, satisfy Krishna. It's stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.9, all fruitive activities should be performed for sacrifice, which should be directed toward pleasing Krishna. As stated elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Krishna is the Supreme Lord and the enjoyer of everything. However, although sacrifice may be offered to please Krishna, he is more pleased when grains and ghee, instead of being offered in the fire, are prepared as prasāda and distributed first to the brahmanas and then to the others. So it's such a splendid thing. A lot of ghee and grains. This is all deficiency in Kali Yuga, right? There's a lack of it. Furthermore, at the present time, it's very little chance to offer sacrifices by pouring oblations of food grains and ghee into the fire. Especially in India, there is practically no ghee. For everything that should be done with ghee, people use a certain type of oil preparation. You know, back in time, we used to use oil. Even Prabhupada used it when he was in America, but it releases a lot of smoke and soot. So we did it once, there was no ghee, we performed one yaga, so we couldn't get rid of this soot after that. Ghee does not produce any soot. Since in Kali Yuga there's less and less of ghee and grain, and people are worried about that. It's all diminishing, and people are embarrassed that they cannot produce sufficient ghee and food grains. Under the circumstances, the Shastras enjoin. So there was one situation. Someone knocked at my door, opened up the door. There was sannyasi, a devotee, spreading books by BBT. He's been even to prison because of his beliefs. So he started producing these books, publishing these books. He was the only one who started publishing them, because everyone else just rejected publishing books from Kṛṣṇa. He would just bribe people, he would bribe some cars or VHS for them, just to make them publish these books. So he was driving from one place to another just to publish the books. He was doing it alone. That was a great austerity. So I opened up the door. He was standing in the door, barely standing on his feet. He was very tired. I could see that. So I got very surprised. I said, "What are you doing here in St. Petersburg? I didn't know you were here. So please come inside." And I said, "You're probably hungry." He said, in a very humble, "Well, yeah, if you have something, if you have a bite of something." I haven't eaten in a whole day. So I dashed to the kitchen, and that guy, he just blacked out. So I cooked some kind of an Armenian dish for him. There was some lentil and some special carrots and aviluk and potatoes. It was very saturated, so I cooked it. So I brought him a whole cup of this hot food. When he saw it, he started shining. He didn't even anticipate to see that. Special this look, I'm sorry. Special food from Armenia. And so he even asked for the second cup. See, and eventually, for these 2 cups of this lentil, he had served me many times more afterwards. And then I remember cooking prasadam in a student's dorm. I remember their reaction. I remember all their faces. These samskaras, they remained. This is a very significant process. When we were living in Almaty, I don't remember many things. But I remember when we invited Govinda Maharaj, I remember this detail as if it was yesterday. Gaurachandrika was cooking, I was, carrying things, organizing things. I even remember that he got very happy about just one specific dish. So we had some some wild strawberry. When I brought it, he said, "Oh." So I remember that very well. It's a transcendental process when you feed people with prasadam. And when these senses of a devotee eating prasadam, we also feel these senses, this happiness. There's a subtle spiritual connection between devotees through prasadam. So every person should join the Sankirtana movement, offering to the fire of this movement the oblations of his knowledge and riches. In our Sankirtana movement or Hare Krishna movement, we offer sumptuous prasadam to the deity and later distribute the same prasadam to the Brahmanas, the Vaishnavas, and then to the people in general. Krishna's prasada is offered to the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, And the prasāda of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas is offered to the general populace. This kind of sacrifice, chanting of Hare Krishna mantra and distribution of prasāda, is the most perfect and bona fide way of offering sacrifice for the pleasure of yajña or Vishnu. You see, we have to watch out for the high quality of kirtans and prasāda, because we always have to make sure the kirtan is good, the prasāda is of a high quality. Okay, devotees, if you have any questions, let's discuss it. So the question is about austerities connected to health. So Kṛṣṇa, you see, Kṛṣṇa doesn't eat anything because he's in austerity all the time. He performs austerities. So he only eats love, and he can eat it only because his devotees had asked him. Austerities for the body are good. It comes naturally. In the end of your life, it is important to regulate your diet. In the afternoon of your life, so like if a person is young and his digestion is good and he's active, no problem, you can eat as much as you want. Sometimes we just couldn't understand why some people don't eat some fried food. We used to eat everything, then running here and there, spreading books, but now everything is different. If you can't run, you have to eat less, right? The wolf is fed by his legs. If you run, you eat. If you can't run, you don't eat so much. Prasāda is prasāda. It can be simple, just simple food. So Kṛṣṇa was performing austerities just like Narayana, remember? It's described there, this incarnation. Kṛṣṇa may not eat anything, and he can eat everything, the whole universe. Another question connected with prasāda of how to offer it to Brahmans and ordinary people. So there's like an order, a usual order. You give prasāda first to Brahmanas. So only after Brahmanas and Vaishnavas have tried this prasāda, only after that you give this food to ordinary people. It's important to get prasāda from your guru, like Mahaprasad as well. So remember, there's a story of how to choose who's a true devotee, who's not. So you mix up all the remnants of food and spread it, and the ones who will reject this food, they will not be true devotees. Once we've done it, that was something. So in our times, people may be sick, so just follow this personal hygiene. Everyone's wearing masks these days, disposable syringes, hard time. So this time we have different technologies of how to cook food. So a lot of us, we have these electrical devices these days, like electrical stove. So we don't actually use fire to cook food. Is that a normal thing? Does the quality of food get or decrease?
Если мы так просто привыкаем готовить на электроплите, ну как нормально, если считаем, то качество просада будет падать.
So
если у нас нет другого выхода,
if we always cook on an electrical stove,
это от Кришны зависит, конечно.
It might not be a good thing, but if you don't have a choice,
на вот коровьем навозе, да, на этих лепешках сухих,
so
на дровах хотя бы.
It's okay, but still, it is better to cook food on fire. So it all depends on our aspiration. So Prabhupada said that you don't have to get used to these conditions of life. They're not okay.
Такие маленькие вещи мы, видите, не привыкли замечать в своей жизни.
You see, we don't even pay attention to these small details.
Людей приучили не замечать такие
Who
вещи.
cooks, how they cook, just we don't pay attention. People are taught not to pay attention to all these things. If you go to a restaurant, some cafes, so we have to restore these things. These things concerning prasāda are very important. So it says that people have this greed for food, and then transforms for greed to prasāda. So it still remains. So it's still an attachment. Is that a normal thing? Or we have to perform more austerities? No, it's a normal thing. If you have this... If you have this desire for prasāda, if he wants to eat it, that means that he's okay, he feels fine. But when a devotee says, no, thank you, I've already had some food, thank you so much, you don't reject prasāda. How come you have so many questions? So I've written them down. Also, we read today about the types of sacrifices. So if a person's artery is prospering, is there a difference what kind of sacrifice he performs? What kind of yajña he performs? So it was said today that it's better to perform sankirtana yajña, or if he only spreads his knowledge of Krishna's consciousness, this will be his yajña as well, his sacrifice. Well, sankirtana yajña is enough, Prabhupada used to say. But as we see, so the spirit of Sankirtana, it spreads, it infiltrates other processes as well. This is an unusual process, unusual situation. So, for example, devotees eventually, they start expressing their reverence to demigods with time, because Sankirtana clarifies your intelligence. For example, Yudhishthira used to communicate with the god of sun,
все организует, чтобы Кришна приехал, больше ни о чем не думает. Но когда нужно, он самостоятельно
So you
может
see,
обратиться к Богу Солнца, к полубогам.
Yudhishthira, when he needed, he could communicate with the God of Lord, with the God of Sun. You know, he had these communications with him. He was performing some austerities. Kshatras do that. I think that with time, as Sankirtana Yagya cleanses our intelligence, we may have a lot of different relations.
Начиная от гарбхатана самскары и до последней. Такие ритуальные, как казалось бы, вещи. Но они необходимы, потому что семья получает личное внимание.
Important because the family gets personal attention from Kṛṣṇa.
Бог вот лично, да, для меня пришел на
So the Lord personally has come to my wedding, for example, specifically for my child. So Sankirtana Yagya can also give you this understanding. Without God, it's just a ritual, senseless ritual. Just for the culture externally, for some sattva, but the essence is enchanting the holy name. That's the essence. The presence of God.
Достиг, ну, практически освобождения, да, прежде чем он к Калининку привязался, он достиг очень высокого уровня, но каким методом он совершал эти
So remember, this attachment to a deer.
Как он развил сознание Кришны? А там говорят ачарьи, он видел их как части тела Верховного. Он Богу не поклонялся.
So this devotee, he was worshipping demigods because he saw in them the parts of God. So now we have to restore the relationship with God. And we also have to worship demigods as well. So the earth world has been created just to support demigods. Sankirtana Yagya, it also does it. But there are many details that can get opened with time because we do develop our relationships. If we do Krishna's consciousness, only in this case, if you don't have it, nothing's going to work out. So Yudhishthira Maharaj, he knew how things were functioning, how everything was arranged. So because of the material desires, Bhagavad Gita says that because of the material desires, people start worshipping demigods just to satisfy their the people's material desires.